Hello, everybody, and welcome to Vietnam 360 here on the Library Channel. My name is George Larrimore, and I'll be your host for the next hour. We appreciate you being here. Our guest today is a guy, I have to acknowledge this, whom I've known since we were about 5 years old. His name is Sterling Withers. He lives in Tunica, Mississippi, and he came up today to be with us on the Library Channel. And he and I were in Vietnam a couple of years apart, but we've rarely talked about Vietnam, and not very much. But we want to talk with him about his experiences today and about how he thinks about it now. We were talking, Sterling, welcome to the show. Appreciate you being here. We were talking a little while ago, and you said that you think about Vietnam every day. Tell me what you think about.
If you've been in combat situations, I don't think it ever leaves you. It's not always bad things, but it's never a day goes by that Vietnam didn't cross my mind at some point. I don't dwell on it, it just, sometimes I smile, something funny happened, one of my buddies did something, and then you get those memories, those bad memories sometimes when, you lost a buddy, or you put somebody in a body bag, or you, after a firefight, you just kind of settle down and, wow, it could have been a lot worse,
That's the kind of experience that you can only have with the people that you serve with.
Oh, yeah.
So you and those guys who've connected, I know we've talked about this, you've connected and stay connected with those people you were in the unit with. So you still share those memories over all this time.
Yeah, I kept up with 6 guys that we found each other afterwards, and we kept up with each other that I served with. Now, I have one really, really good friend that we went through basic and AIT with, and we separated when we got, when he went to Vietnam. I went to Vietnam, he went to the 173rd, and I went to the Air Cavalry. But people I served with, and out of those 6, 3 of them are gone. And I did the eulogy for one of them. And so, we're getting on up there in years, and we're kind of like I guess the next guys would be the Korean people, and they got to be in their 90s.
Right.
There
aren't many of them left. There's only,
and there ain't gonna be many of us left pretty soon.
It's almost a handful of people who fought in World War II.
Oh yeah, they in the hundreds or late 90s.
Very, very, very rare. If you don't mind, kind of go back to the beginning. Tell me how you ended up in the Army. Tell me how you ended up going to Vietnam.
I was going to Northwest Community Junior College. It was, I started in '66, and Vietnam was, kicking up pretty good then. And but if you were in college, you had a deferment, And I say this often when I was at Northwest. I wasn't letting my books get in the way of my college education. I was having fun, and and I had to go an extra year because I played too much. And in 1969, I graduated from Northwest, and I was just going to lay out and work, and because none of us had much money then. I didn't have a car or anything like that, but I was going to lay out and work and go back to school when I got some money, saved up or whatever. But when I didn't register for school in fall of September '69, I got my draft notice in October. So they knew exactly where I was, But I, young and dumb, and they, somehow or another, I wasn't going, it wasn't going to happen to me, But it did happen to me. And but they deferred me until February of '70. I was already gone. I couldn't join the National Guard. I couldn't get in the Army Reserve because I already had my draft notice. And as you remember, you were back home by then, but the lottery came out. I believe it was November or December of the 1st of November, the 1st of December, one of the two, when they were drawing the ping pong balls out of the Domingo ball or whatever. But I would have gone anyway. I think my number was 166. They went to 2-something that year, so I would have gone. It had just been a little later. I went in the Army, got drafted, went in, I tell you who, you know him, Leslie Poole and I went in the Army together. He was a classmate of ours, and we went to the William Lynn Hotel and spent the night and all that kind of stuff. So, a funny thing did happen, though, at the induction place. We were down in that basement, and we were all lined up, and some sergeant or something came out there, and we took the oath, and then he said, count off 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I was an odd number. I was either 1 or 3. And he said, all the 2 step forward. They stepped forward. He said, welcome to the United States Marine Corps. Man, I was never so glad I was a 3 or whatever. I didn't know they could do that. I always thought the Marines had to be volunteered,
Well, the Marine Corps wanted you to think they were volunteers.
Yeah.
Because they didn't, it was not very well known that the Marine Corps was drafted.
Was drafted, that's right.
But by this point, and this is 1969, 70.
Yeah.
So by this point,
They were needing bodies.
they were needing bodies. I mean, that's a harsh way to put it, but it's true.
Yeah,
they needed bodies to fill up the numbers. So
Exactly. And so, we left that night and went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, did my basic there. At the end of Fort Bragg, we all get our, what do you call it, AIT.
Yeah.
And I had 11 Bravo.
It's advanced infantry training.
Yeah. Advanced individual training or advanced infantry training, whatever you want it to be. But if you were a cook, it was advanced individual training. But if you were, and everybody knows what 11 Bravo is, that was my MOS, 11 Bravo.
Yeah, in the Marine Corps, it's an 0300.
0300.
Same thing as an MOS. It tells you that's what your job is, what your job's going to be. So, yeah.
And then we got sent to Fort Polk. That was, Fort Polk was what they called Tigerland, Norfolk. And it was, you get down there and you fly in we left that afternoon going to Fort Polk. Got down there, in the late afternoon.
Is that in Louisiana?
Yeah, Fort Polk, Louisiana, Leedsville. It was the home of, we see a big sign coming into the post, home of the combat infantryman for Vietnam. And, we did our training there, and it was 4 of us that piled around together. A boy named Hugh Mitchell Cannon, he was from Calhoun City. A boy named Bobby Wilkshire, who was a bonus baby baseball player. He had gotten drafted. He'd gotten drafted by the Philadelphia Phillies, and he was playing baseball in Reading, Pennsylvania. But he got drafted too. And a boy named Charles Powell was from South Carolina, and we just all piled around together. And we were at Fort Polk together the whole time. And everybody at Fort Polk in our battalion, which is 1,100 people, we got orders for Vietnam, except for 5. And they were either sole surviving son, you didn't have to go to a combat zone. They didn't get out of the Army, they go into Germany or somewhere like that. Or maybe if you had a brother who'd been killed over there or a family member over there, you didn't have to go to the combat zone. And so, I'll tell you a funny story. I just shared this on Facebook not too long ago. And we were all in, calling out orders, and my 3 buddies had volunteered for jump school, Fort Benning. They wanted me to go. And that's when I said, guys, we finna split the sheets now, because I'm not jumping out of a perfectly good airplane, and I don't see any reason why y'all should. But anyway, they laughed about it, and we were standing there, and they called, Cannon, Fort Benning, Wilkshire, Fort Benning, Powell, Fort Benning. They called my name out, and Withers, Panama, jungle school. I didn't volunteer for jungle school, but, and sometimes you get drafted again, so anyway. But and then they went to Fort Benning, I went to jungle school in Panama, and then we all, then we went our separate ways then, And then my next orders were Vietnam.
Let me ask you something. At this point, I mean, you read the papers, you watched the news. You were 21 years old, 22 years old at this point, so you knew something about Vietnam.
Yeah.
What were you thinking about Vietnam at the time? Or did you even have any, real thoughts about, well, I'm going, or I'm.
Well, after I got drafted and after I got my orders, I really had some ideas about it. But when we were in college, I'd read the paper. But it wasn't going to happen to me, But I thought, it was me being from the South, me being a country boy. I thought we were doing the right thing. The honorable thing is fighting communism. When I was in the 7th grade, we had a whole 6 weeks on communism. I knew what communism was. I don't think people know what communism is today. These young folks don't. But, I knew it was a bad thing, and, I knew they were, my idea at the time was we were trying to stop communism. You remember the domino theory? Mm-hmm. If South Vietnam fell, then Cambodia was going to fail, and then Thailand and Laos was going to fail. So,
We were getting that message at the little Methodist church where we went to church, where there was a local guy who was well-schooled in communism and anti-communism, and he would get up in front of the congregation and talk about the evils of communism. I remember that when I couldn't have been more than about 8 or 9.
No,
but it was a message. This is something you need to hear. So that's something that's when people think about going to Vietnam or not, that the environment, the climate in America at the time was very different than a lot of people think it was. There was a fear and a resistance to communism and an awareness that something needed to be done to fight against it.
Well, we all knew who Nikita Khrushchev was. We had studied about what Stalin did, his purge and things like that. And of course, Mao Zedong had taken over China at the time, so communism was a big thing back in the 60s.
Tell me about actually going to Vietnam. That trip that you were saying something earlier that's pretty funny.
Oh.
It turns out that a lot of stories that I find that Vietnam veterans tell about their experiences end up being the things that you remember that are kind of funny.
Well, I say one thing, the coldest I've ever been was in July in San Francisco. We went out on the town and we were cooped up in this place and just a bunch of rooms and it'd be about 30 of us in a room. We all going to Vietnam. They let us go out the night before we was going to leave. And of course, it was July, so we only had our khaki uniforms, no coats, no dress, and we went downtown, and it was freezing. I said, man, I'm going back to the base. And we were at Oakland Army Base. I couldn't stand it, So, but anyway, we left the next day from Travis Air Force Base, which is about.
What day was this?
Huh?
What day was this that you left?
July 4th.
July the 4th. Okay.
Yeah. And we left and we were flying west. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And when we took off and we were stopped in Hawaii, and then, nobody got off the plane. They were just refueling. It's still daylight. We've been flying 5 hours, but, And then we went to Wake Island. And then somewhere between Wake Island and Okinawa, we crossed the international date line. And, my birthday was on the 5th, and when we got to Okinawa, it was the 6th. So I missed the birthday, so I'm a year younger than y'all think I am.
It didn't shorten your tour.
No.
You're not allowed to do that.
No. And then we flew into Benoit,
right.
And then.
Right. So you went from the United States to Vietnam. You didn't have a stopover anywhere.
No.
Where you were shuffled out.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
All right.
We went.
You weren't assigned to units in another. You were assigned units before you left the United States.
It took us 22 hours.
Right.
We watched 3 movies on that airplane,
Civilian plane?
United Airlines.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And, a lot of people, when they left, they left out of Fort Lewis, Washington, they go to Alaska and go that way. But we went to, like I say, Hawaii, Wake, Okinawa, and then flew right into Benoit. And, and when you got off the plane, it was about, it was breaking day when we got to Benoit, and the smell was different.
Yeah.
You know, everything got real then. You know, when the bus came to get you off the plane, and you saw the buses had bars on the windows and everything, so people, you know, couldn't throw grenades in there or RPGs, anything. So things started, you know, getting real.
Now tell our audience where Benoit is, or where it was at the time, and what part of Vietnam.
It's right in the middle, in the south. Okay. It's in 3 Corps. It's in the Delta. You had I think the 2 biggest bases over there were Long Binh and Benoit. And it's about 20 miles north of Saigon on Highway 1, QL1. Yeah. Long Binh was pretty close to Benoit. That's where they took us. That was you know, that's where you went. I stayed 3 days in Long Binh before I got shipped out to my unit.
Now you talked about Panama for a second. And you were in jungle training in Panama. Now they're training you jungle training for what? To do what? What was going to be your job?
I kind of thought I would eventually end up in a recon platoon.
Now that's short for reconnaissance.
Yeah. And that's where I did end up. But the main purpose of us 30 EMs that had just got out of AIT, we were in really good shape. You know, we had basic AIT was more almost like basic, except just more training on weapons and real stuff. You know, when I got
different kinds of weapons.
Yeah.
How to take them apart and put them back together.
Exactly. And Hugh Mitchell and I, we would sit together at those things because we were in the same, you know, unit at Tigerland. And Hugh Mitchell noticed those guys that, you're sitting at a little amphitheater kind of like them. You're going to talk about booby traps, you're going to talk about ambushes and stuff like that. And those guys that had been to Vietnam, they always had CIB on their shoulder, right there. And Hugh Mitchell, he looked at me, he said, we better start listening. He said, those guys have been there, they know. It wasn't some guy that was training you. He had been to Vietnam, and he had made it home, and he was in the infantry. And when those guys started talking, our ears perked up. But to get back to Panama, when I got down there, it was 144 of us there. We had the 5th Special Forces were there. That was their base, Fort Sherman Canal Zone. They were training, we had 140 first and second lieutenants. They had been sitting behind a desk for 6 months or so waiting on orders to go to Vietnam. This was their refresher course before they went over to Vietnam. They had us there, fresh out of AIT, to carry the Prick 25 radio and the M60 machine guns while we played war games for the lieutenants and everything. But we got the same training they got. And really, the instructors were, they were Green Berets. And a lot of these lieutenants had been sitting behind a desk for 6 months. They weren't in near about as good a shape as we were. And those instructors, they were hard on those first and second lieutenants, You could say anything as long as you called them sir, and you gonna let this EM outdo you, sir, But it was good training. It really was good training. I learned one of the scariest things that I've ever did was rappel. I mean, if you ain't ever done that, I never know what rappelling was. Right. Well, first we had to come off a 50-foot tower straight down. And it was frightening. But, like a lot of things in the Army, you had never done before, but once you done them and you found out you could do them, your confidence level goes up.
And your confidence bleeds over into everything else.
Everything else you do. If I can do that, I can do anything. Well, come to find out on our training out in we were playing war games. We had certain certain things we had to do and certain places we had to be and all that. Well, we got to a waterfall in Panama. Only way to get down that waterfall where we had to go was rappel. So, and that rappelling down that waterfall wasn't as scary as coming off that tower for the first time, you know? So it was really good training. I learned a lot. You know, you learn, and we ate monkeys, we ate snakes. You know, one time they had a whole bunch of food on the table, and you know we'd eat it, and then they tell us what it was. Mm-hmm. You may have to do that. I never had to do it in Vietnam. Yeah. You know, but you know that's what jungle school's all about.
Going back to Benoit.
Yep.
Then they assigned you to a unit. Now we were talking about reconnaissance earlier, and I have a sense of what it is. But tell our audience what, if they put you in a recon unit, what are you going to do? What's your job going to be?
Sneaking and peeking, basically, is what they, my unit was a ground reconnaissance, and I wasn't even in an infantry unit. It was the 1st Aviation Brigade with my 3rd and the 17th Air Cavalry. Delta troop, Delta always stands for recon. So if you're in Delta Troop, you're in recon. And basically they would put us in an area, an AO, area of operation, if we were going to work with the 1st Cavalry, say, the 1st Cavalry. I'm learning about this all later, you know. I didn't know where I was most of the time. You know, all we know is we going to Swan Lock, or we going to Tain Inn, or we going to Long Trot, somewhere like that. We would know the general area, but we would go
find it on a map.
Find it on a map. Yeah. We would go, and they would put us in there, and we would pull our ambushes and pull our patrols. First thing we would do is go, if there was a village there, we would go into the village. And I'll tell you this: the first time I met my squad. I got my squad when I got to the field. And, you know, I was a new guy, and they gave me the M60 machine gun. That's just the way it, chain of command or seniority, you know. I could carry the 60, in our group, I could carry the 60 as long as I wanted to, or the next new guy came in, he gets the 60. Mm-hmm. Then the guy that, he could carry the radio if he wanted to, or he would give me the radio. Mm-hmm. Well, that's the way it worked, you know. I met my sergeant. He had been over there. His name was Sergeant Peck. He was from West Virginia. My whole squad, and we didn't ever really have a full-blown platoon. We might have had 20, 24. You know, a platoon was supposed to be 30. We was always short-handed. My squad leader, my first squad leader, was a guy named Charles Peck from West Virginia. 3rd tour doing this. Right. I can't imagine people want to do that 3 times.
And the tours a year.
Yeah, and tours a year. But he was a lifer, you know, going to be a lifer. He was I think he'd been up to an E6, but he had been busted down for something he did, you know, and he was the E5, but he was a really, really good soldier. And he kind of took me under his wing, and I never will forget this. He said, Mississippi, they call me Mississippi, if you stay with me, I'll teach you everything I know, and I'll get you back home. I believe what he said too. So anyway, and Sergeant Peck was a good soldier, he really was.
Now you were...
but sneaking and peeking is what we did. Mm-hmm. Our job wasn't to kill them, although we did have several firefights. It was to find them and find out how many it was and how often they, you know, came out. And we would usually set up ambushes in the jungles or coming away. All the villages were where we were in 3 Corps. It's just Delta. It's just jungles, you know. And I'll tell you another thing about Sergeant Peck. When we went into that village the first time, got back, you know, got back to the CP. We would sit up in the middle of nowhere, and we started digging our foxholes and all that. And Sergeant Peck asked me, he said, Mississippi, what'd you think about that village? I said, Sergeant, it looked like pretty friendly to me. It wasn't nothing but a bunch of old, papa sons and mama sons and some children. He said, it ain't gonna be no fun being here. He said, that's the problem. It wasn't any teenagers or young men in that village. We're gonna have a situation here for long. Because they were, from 12 to about 40, I guess, or 50, ever how long, those were the VC ages, If you get into a village and you didn't see any young people, teenagers, 20, 25 years old, something like that, I didn't know what was happening, but Sergeant Peck knew what was going to happen,
Right. Tell me what it was like for you the first time you were in a firefight. Try to remember that. Try to describe that.
Oh, I remember it well. I remember exactly how it was. We got in a new area. I was driving a Jeep for the lieutenant. I had a new E5s riding on my back, but he was on the 60. I was driving the Jeep. We went by a rubber plantation, and the rubber plantations, they're just like pecan groves. They're planted in rows, We drove down. We saw these, probably 6 or 7 Vietnamese, how they sat down, squatted down. Well, we went and got to a dead end on the map, so we had to turn and come back out. Well, between the rubber plantation and there was an open area. And those guys that we ran past were VC. We didn't stop and check their ID or anything like that. They didn't run. They act like they were workers. But when we came back out of that and got in that opening, rat-tat-tat, pop, 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 rat-tat-tat. And I was about the 3rd Jeep. But finally it dawned on me what was going on, And the sergeant on my Jeep had gotten shot. He got shot off the back. I just threw the Jeep up in neutral and ran. It rolled into the back of the one in front of me who was stopped, wasn't going very fast. And, I had we just all bailed out, and I knew what was going on then, But it was more scary afterwards than it was during, when you get thinking about it, We had 3 guys wounded. We called for medevac. I helped carry one of the guys and put him on the medevac, and he was shot all to pieces down in this area, Things got really real after that, And then 3 days later, we knew we were in a bad area. When they initiate contact, they think they got the numbers or whatever. 3 days later, we were on patrol. I was what they call a fire team leader.
A fire team is a smaller group, within a squad,
that's right.
Within a platoon, within a company.
That's right. That's right. It made me a fire team leader. And we were on patrol, and my squad leaders he just stopped. He said, we kind of whispered back and forth. It wasn't no yelling and stuff. You know how it goes. And Sergeant Martin wanted us to stop for a minute. He came up to me and he said, Mississippi, take them on up the trail. He said, and wait on me. I'm going to set up a booby trap back here. And within about, I took them on up a little ways and we just kind of melted down. And I was with my best friend at the time who was carrying the 60, a boy named Lee Ballinger from West Virginia. And I was talking about Southern boys, but he was more country than we were. And anyway, Ballinger and I were kind of in charge then. It was a small platoon. It was just, a patrol. And we heard the explosion.
The booby trap.
The booby trap. Something went wrong. He told me what he was going to do. He told me how he was going to do it. He said, I'm dig a hole. I'm going to put a grenade in, take the pin out, stick it down the hole, and I'm going to put claymore on top of it. He said,
Claymore is
an
a
anti-personnel mine. Yeah. He said, and of course, if it sits down over the grenade, something happened. We don't know.
The weight of the claymore would hold the grenade
really down yeah.
so that it wouldn't go off.
And when the VC goes, pull the claymore up, it would go off. Well, something, I don't know if he fumbled, missed, let the spoon go or whatever, but he would. And things got really real then. When you had to put your sergeant in a body bag, it was. I still have visions of him, when we found him, and he was he weighed about 220. He was on his second tour, and I remember just how heavy he was when we put him in the body bag. 220 pounds of dead weight. That's a lot. It took 4 of us to pick it up and put it on the helicopter, Yeah. And it was, it dawned on me real quick. This ain't gonna be no good. This ain't gonna be no fun, But I was there. I couldn't do anything. Wasn't going nowhere, Just had to learn how to deal with it.
And then you get with, it's a small unit. Even if you're at full strength, it's still a small unit. It's not very many people.
So you get
real close with people in terms of getting to know. I mean, you every person you mention, you are in this conversation, you say something about them because it's stuff that you remember.
Yeah.
Well, so-and-so was from West Virginia. He was more country than we were. You get close with people, I guess is what I'm saying. Then you start to, you'd establish, pardon the expression, a bond that you don't establish in any other way, in any other part of your life.
You make a bond with somebody in hard times, it's a bond for life. In the military, the people you bond with, especially over there, you had buddies the same way, in your mortar platoon. I mean, you remember those guys. Yeah, I mean, you think you would never ever forget them,
Mm-hmm. And you don't.
And I don't. I sure don't.
Look at the pictures of them now.
Oh, man.
They're still 19.
Exactly. And I would and we had a lot of 18, 19-year-old guys. And I was 22 when I got in country. I was one of the older guys, except, I mean, you may have a sergeant older than you, but as far as the enlisted man goes, I was the oldest one. It's, so. And then you started prioritizing it by how long you've been in country,
Right.
So
counting those days.
Counting days and stuff like that. And of course, but that was our job for the most part.
Right.
You
were reconnaissance. You were out there on your own.
Oh yeah.
We're not surrounded by
barbed wire or we were in a base camp. Our base camp was a place called Zion. It was spelled Diane, D-I-A-N, Zion. It was north of Benoit, I don't even know if it was on QL1 or QL13, but it was a big base camp. It's where the 1st Division first got to country, and they built Zion, the Big Red 1 infantry. Mm-hmm. When we got to Zion, Big Red 1 had already left. They had pulled them out, and but it was a base camp. And we came back there twice in 9 months. Every once in a while we get a break if we were in the field. We call it a stand down. You come back, it's just like a in-country R&R party time. If they pulled us out of the field and took us back for a stand down, it was just, go to EM club, drink all day, didn't have to pull guard duty, didn't have to make formation, just relax, whatever you call it.
Yeah. Tell me about heads and juicers.
Our unit, and I don't know if most units are that way. I only know what happened in my unit. It was not segregated by blacks and whites. It was heads and juicers. Heads were the ones that were doing dope, and It's like today, a head can get dope anywhere. It's just they have that way about them, you know. And juicers. We drank a lot of beer over there. It was 3.2 beer, but it tasted better than the water. You know, if we had a water, if we had a situation for water, it was in the old black bladder thing, and it was so hot, it's like drinking bath water.
Right.
Well, beer was better than, I mean, you could drink a case of it to get drunk on it, you know. So, but heads and juicers, those were the, and I'd never, and when we got back to the stand down, my eyes got really open. I'd been around a few people that did drugs in college, you know, smoked marijuana, but these guys were, I mean, whoo, they were tore down. They couldn't party because they were so, drugged out. But
you told me that you chose your own people for certain missions.
I did.
And you chose
juices.
because you didn't trust.
Well, as you could see how they wasn't the best soldiers now, I'm telling you, because they were, you couldn't trust them. I don't know if you could trust them or not, because they ended up, they had their own squad. I don't know what they did when they went on ambush. They may only just got out there and went to sleep. I don't know. But yeah, you don't want anybody going to sleep. And it would be a 12-hour night. And when we were on ambush, it's hard to stay up from 2 to 4. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes, so we only did it 1 hour at a time. We'd set up in a circle like this. We'd have our claymores out, and we would be so close, I could reach over and touch this guy. You know. And we had the radio sitting in the middle of us. And the radio, we would have to, the guys back in the command post would call in every hour on the hour and say, our call letter was Blue Tiger 26. Blue Tiger 26, if everything's okay, we couldn't talk. You just break squelch twice. And whoever was sitting up, so you squeeze that, you know, then you wouldn't hear from them again for another hour unless you needed them for something. Yeah. Those were scary nights. Monsoons, it didn't make any difference. Every day was the same over there, you know. I guess that was the worst time for me, except for bad areas with the monsoons. You just stay wet, your feet shriveled up, you're just miserable. You know, sleeping out there in bugs and mosquitoes and stuff like that, you know.
Yeah. Sterling, you got wounded in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Tell us what happened.
I was going on my 9th month in country. We had just came out. The platoon sergeant, Peck, had left by this time. He had ETS'd out or gone back to the rear. If in our unit, if you got within about a month of your ETS and you were a good soldier, they'd find you a job in the rear. They'd take you out of the field. Peck had gone back to the field, and I had a new sergeant, and Sergeant Martin, he's the one that got killed. Then I had another new sergeant, but we had a platoon daddy, what we call him. He was the E7. He was an old dude, man. He was in his 50s. He'd been in Korea. But anyway, he had started.
An old dude in his 50s.
Yeah. I mean, you know, there's the Army. He was a prisoner of war in Korea. But he was a hardcore dude. But anyway, he had, back in November, and I'd been in country since July. I was one of the older ones in country, and I'd probably seen more action than most of them. He started grooming me to walk point because we always had 2 people, you know, that could walk point. And I always had to be we didn't let the new guys walk point. You had to be, you know, you had to have some time in country and prove yourself, you know, that you knew what you're doing, or at least they thought you knew what you were doing. So he would told me, he said, you know, when the 2 older guys leave, Marvin and one of them was Marvin Carlisle, and I forget his name right now, but but he said, I want you to start walking point. So then Marvin and it was a boy named Spencer. He said, they kind of took me under their wings then, and we were friends, and they would show me things about that. But in the meantime, we got pulled out of the field. I was walking point for a little while, and then we got pulled out of the field and we started running convoy security for convoys going up in the small fire bases up in the edge of the mountains, and we were on those gun jeeps, and I was on the 60 then, but then we left fire. That was pretty good duty. It wasn't. I mean, at least we slept in a tent at night. We had to pull ambushes. We'd have to be back by dark. We'd run up in the mountains and leave out early in the morning. And of course, we were taking artillery rounds up to those fire bases and stuff. But it was pretty good duty for about a month and a half. I mean, we enjoyed that. I mean, didn't enjoy it, but it was, it's always something going on. But anyway, they put us back out in the field. We was working with the 1st Cavalry, going to a new place that they were going to have an operation in. We had to, go back to pulling ambushes and patrols again. And no sooner than we got out there, we started getting contact. We had already had 2 firefights. It hadn't been there but 6, 7 days. And so we went out. It was our time to be on patrol. And plus, we were working with some Arvins, that was the South Vietnamese soldiers. At this time, they'd gone into pacification thing. You had to, we were training them, So it was 6 of us and 6 of them, and we would go out and, we were supposed to be teaching them. Well, we go out, and it was a daytime ambush, and we were going to go out all day, and then when it got dark, right before dark, we was going to get up and move again. We're going to stay out there all night. And because most of the time they would be coming out of the villages about, dark, and then they'd come back in the morning to VC. And it got dark over there around 6 o'clock, something like that, So it was about 5 o'clock. We were going to get up and move, and when we passing along, okay, get your, we didn't set our claymores out during the day, but all we had was our rucksacks. And when we put our rucksacks on, the sergeant said, okay, let's get up. And he told the Arvins. And the Arvins we set up a bigger perimeter. It was about as big as this room. And when we stood up to put our rucksacks on to move, they broke the ambush on us. And they came up on the Arvin side. Not our side, but the Arvin side. The Arvins were probably, they wasn't very good soldiers. At least we didn't think so. And that was the longest firefight I was in that day. It was like 45 minutes. And when we finally got out of there, we had a couple of Arvins wounded. None of us got wounded. But when you fight that long, it's stressful, to say the least. Couldn't get a Cobra in. You didn't want to shoot up the village, but the Cobras finally came in. VC broke, and we were going back to our platoon, and back to our CP, and one of the guys dropped the claymore out of his rucksack. And I guess, they always, the next morning we were going to go in and get a body count. We thought and I was walking point the next morning because I was the one on the patrol the day before. I knew where to go. But except we came in a different way. We didn't go down the same. You never went the same way twice. And I was walking point, and after a while you get tired. You're breaking jungle, breaking bush. My arms were kind of bloody and everything. So I just kind of sent, or we had Spencer would walk point, then I would walk point. Spencer would walk point, and I would walk point at this time. And I was like 9 months in country. And I whispered back to the LT. I said, "Can I take a break? I'm getting tired." And he said, "Yeah, we did this all the time." He said, "Tell Spencer to take point." I just stepped off the trail and I let 4 guys go ahead of me. And I stepped in front of the 60 man who was my best friend. And we were walking single file, stretched out. And it was about 20 minutes later. We don't know if it was if it was a tripwire or command detonated, maybe the VC was in the bush, But anyway, he blew the claymore on us, and it wounded. Got Spencer, it got platoon dead. It was walking slack. That's the point man watches the ground and the slack man watches the trees. Platoon daddy was watching the trees, and Spencer was supposed to be walking, tripwires. And so anyway, but it blew me off. It wounded 4 of us, and it medevac 4 of us off, but it killed Jarhead. He was right in front of me, and it messed up Spencer really bad. Platoon daddy made it back to the company area. He beat me back. I stayed in the hospital 40 days. Got the guy dusted off. They put me on the chopper with Sergeant Langus. We call him Jarhead because he had been in the Marines. And, I guess he got drafted in the Marines because he had been over it once before. And he was probably one of those 2-year guys. And he was going to make a career out of the Army. I was laying there, and he just had one little trickle of blood coming down his face, but I knew he was dead because, but we got, that's the thing that saved me was I was carrying my rifle at, port arms, and I really thought that while it blew me off in kind of a canal, and I had mud and water all in my face and my eyes and everything, and I could tell I was, been wounded and everything. And the guys got to me, and I said, bring me my rifle, And because I thought we got ambushed again. And one of them found my rifle and brought it back to me. It didn't have any handguards on it. It was, a piece of shrapnel had hit it and blew it off. And I guess, you can survive with the wounds I had, shrapnel. But if you get a sunken chest wound, those are not good. And after that, they flew me out. And I remember in the hospital, it happened about 9:30 in the morning, and they didn't operate on me. They didn't take me in the operating room till about 1 o'clock. I was laid out there, they had people coming all around me, nurses checking on me all the time. And I would and this thing is running through your mind. I said, they mustn't think I'm gonna be all right, else I would be in surgery by now, And I guess, they come look at me, and I wasn't. Of course, when you get shrapnel wounds, and if it doesn't hit an artery, it burns, it cauterizes the wounds, so you don't bleed that much. I could tell. I could look at my wounds, and I had a big one here, and a big one here, and a big one here, a little one here, and a little one here. A piece of my ear was, right there.
Yeah.
And when I got back to the rear, at Long Bend, they didn't send me back to the field. I didn't like a month and a half in country.
Sterling, we got about
my time
6
was
minutes
over.
left. Your time was over. You were done.
I was in the rear rest of the time.
Yeah. We got about 6 minutes left.
Sure.
I'm going to talk about how you see Vietnam today. We were talking earlier about you're on Facebook, and you told me that when you post something about Vietnam, that you get a lot of positive energy from people, a lot of positive feedback from people. How do you think Vietnam veterans are looked at today as opposed to the way it was when you got back, and that's more than 50 years ago?
Oh, totally different. Totally different. I think the Vietnam veterans are well received now. There may be some hard cases out there, but for the most part, you know, when I came back to Tunk, I was well received when I got back home. Now, like I say, they thought, maybe some people thought I was a little, you know, a little weird or whatever, because when thunder would happen, I'd jump under something or car would backfire. But that's just, you know, combat stuff, you know. But no, I think the Vietnam veteran now is I think he's held in high regard. Mm-hmm. I think people realize that we could have won that thing outright, but it was a political situation. We had politicians calling shots instead of generals, and I don't know how you lose a war and never lose a battle. That's the puzzling part, you know. A lot of 58,000 people died for nothing, the way I look at it. But that wasn't on the army, it wasn't on the soldiers, it wasn't on the people fighting, it was on the politicians. But I think, to answer your question, I think the Vietnam veteran is looked on in a whole lot different light than it was in 1960 or 70 or whenever we came home.
And you were reminded of Vietnam every day. I would say to me, I asked you to take a picture of Kenny Hill, a sign in the town of Tunica recognizing Kenny Hill, who was killed in Vietnam. You practically drive by it every day, I would think.
Oh yeah, I live one street over from Kenny Hill Drive.
Right. Yeah. And there's a memorial in the town.
Yeah.
For that. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay. How do you think Vietnam veterans have been portrayed, movies, television, etc.?
Oh, yeah.
Again, over all of this long time.
I think it's a lot of Hollywood. I think the most realistic Vietnam movie, and I don't know how in the hell Platoon got an Academy Award, because you didn't see sergeants fighting against each other, you know. That didn't go on over there. At least not in my platoon, you know. We might not like each other that much, but we wasn't trying to kill each other in our own platoon. We Were Soldiers was the most realistic Vietnam movie that I hadn't watched all of them. I hadn't seen them because they were so Hollywood up. But I think We Were Soldiers were taking you from the training to the actual battle and all that. It was more realistic than anything else. Of course, they had Colonel Moore on site doing the. I'll tell you one thing that I remember a line in that movie that by the time I gotten over there, I realized the war wasn't going to end on our watch, and we were more or less just fighting for each other, trying to get, you know, fighting for my buddies, trying to get me home and them home too, you know.
Like your sergeant had told you from the very beginning.
Yeah. I'll get you home if you know, but, you know, we realized it wasn't going to end over there. Well, you know, it wasn't going to end in 1971, and it didn't, you know. So when you start getting short, you start thinking, oh, man, you know, we just want to get home now, you know.
What do you, if you're watching an NFL game on Sunday, and they do a flyover, and they have a flag ceremony, and they honor veterans, and you hear that a lot. All of us hear that a lot. What do you think when you see that? As a Vietnam veteran, what do you think when you see that kind of outpouring of support?
It makes you glad. It makes you feel proud that people recognize your service. And I was in the infantry. I probably, you know, not everybody. It takes 10 people to take care of one infantryman, or what the Marines call critical MOSs. But everybody did their part. If you know, I might have had it a little rougher, a little harder than the personnel clerk, but he did his job. It wasn't his choice to be a personnel clerk. He was assigned to that job, or a supply sergeant, or an armature that took care of your weapons and stuff like that. if you went to Vietnam, you were exposed to mortars and rockets at any time. Just because you were back in the base camp, that wasn't what they call behind the lines like it was in World War II. I mean, they shot rockets in the Long Binh and every base camp over there, you know. It was a dangerous place is what it was.
What's your, thinking about it now, what's your experience in Vietnam that means the most to you? Or that I could say might be the most positive thing that happened to you as a result of Vietnam?
Whoa. The only thing positive came out of it, if I figured if I could live through that, I could do most anything. It builds your confidence up, you know. A lot of good friends, a lot of good buddies, but it gives you that sense of accomplishment. Not many people have seen combat.
But you,
I just happen to be one of the few that have lived through it. And now I got, like I say, I got a couple of good buddies that we can talk about it. And that was it.
I appreciate you being here today
Oh.
on Vietnam 360. This is Sterling Withers. Again, what an incredible story that you're telling. So, if you've seen this show very many times, you've seen that we visit certain places around the country where they honor the service of Vietnam veterans. And I want to mention another place before we close tonight. This is at the Missouri National Veterans Memorial, which is in the town of Perryville, Missouri, which I passed just a couple of weeks ago. It's the brainstorm of a guy named Jim Edelman, and it's a museum that recognizes the service of women. There were 8 women who were killed in Vietnam. Their names are on the wall. It shows telegrams that were sent to families when the people were notified that someone had been killed, letters written home. But outside is a full-size wall of Vietnam Veterans Memorial that has all of the names of all of the dead, including 1,000 people from the state of Missouri. And if you're driving along there, it's about an hour and a half south of St. Louis. Try to get by there and visit all of these memorials because they're in many towns around the United States. We appreciate you being here with us on Vietnam 360. We thank Sterling Withers for being here with us today. We thank WYPL for giving us this opportunity. Again, I'm George Larrimore. We'll see you next time.